Hello, it's Classy here, back with another Tribes video, and although this is a little bit late, today I will be showcasing a 5-star Madara Uchiha White Mask that was from the previous banner. And shout out to Jack from Server 16 for sending me all of the clips. He does have the strongest Madara in our server right now, so this will be a good basis to judge how good this unit is. And speaking of that, there has been discussion surrounding him versus Sage Mode Jiraiya, so we're going to touch upon that as well. And without further ado, we have a URD unit, 60,000 power total, tier 16 and level 84. And for the art, I personally really like this art. I can't say it's like the top tier 5-star art, but with the animations and the blue color scheme, it does look really nice, especially if you're a fan of the color blue like me. The only complaint I can really say is that they didn't show his 2 eyes, the Sharingan, the Rinnegan, and I thought those were two pretty important qualities for this specific variation of the character. Now for his stats, we can see that he actually is very well rounded. The only stat that's pretty lacking is the guard suppression rate, but besides that, everything else is around 25% or higher, especially the guard rate, which is really nice to have for a tank, the critical rate and damage increase rate as well. So this is a really balanced tank, I'd say, which is nice to see, and it should allow him to do some decent damage as well as taking like a lot of hits throughout the battles. Now let's take a look at the link bonuses. Kabuto and Orochimaru, Kisame and Konan, and B and KCM Naruto. So these links might be a little bit hard to get, especially the third one, but everything here makes sense with the lore. So I do think they do a good job with the links most of the time by connecting it to the lore somehow. I wish the story missions had some kind of lore in them as well, but that's kind of off topic. But yeah, the KCM and B link luckily is not the most important one, so if you're missing one of the two, you shouldn't worry too much. Now we can see his sprite. I actually like this sprite also. I just think it's well made, and the idle animation is not too crazy like Kisame's, but it's also visually appealing from the front and the back. Now we're going on to his kit. First thing is Kamui. So this will deal AoE power creep damage to all active enemies with a 15% chance to stun them. This will lower the target's damage increase rate by 18% for the rest of the battle and boost all allies' damage reduction rate by 25%. So the fact that the debuffs on this jutsu will last for the rest of the battle is pretty important, and it's a pretty significant debuff, so this is nice to see. And the damage reduction rate buff is not bad either. But more importantly, I think the AoE stun makes him really good here, just based on this jutsu alone. I feel like you can't really go wrong with stuns, so having more AoE stunners is definitely not unique, but it doesn't mean he's bad by any means. I think it does make him better than if he just did a debuff and a buff. So I do like this jutsu. It's not really unique or on character, but that doesn't affect how good this unit is. That's just my opinions on like Bandai's lack of flavoring in the game. I really wish they either implemented new effects or chose the effects wisely to kind of reflect how the characters are in the anime. And yeah, so we have a debuff that will stack, and then the buff will just protect the allies for that turn. Now for skill 2, he'll do regular skill 2 damage and then boosts all allies guard rate by 48%. So this doesn't stack either, just keep that in mind. It doesn't last for the rest of the battle, but it's a really significant boost. And considering how he may end up having some chakra problems, this is actually a really good skill 2. One of the best ones I've seen recently, just because that's a really high number and it affects all allies. And yeah, we'll get to the chakra thing later. So we're gonna skip skills 3, 5, and 6 as always, because they're pretty much the same for all units of the same type and rarity. And then for his skill 4, he'll boost all active allies damage reduction rate by 27% when he's active at the start of the turn, and all allies guard rate by 17% for the rest of the battle. So the first half of this skill will not be stackable / permanent, so just keep that in mind as always, but it is a good defense boost. 27% is a pretty high number, so it will definitely help the active allies survive. And then the guard rate will last through the rest of the battle, so this is a really significant boost as well. Although this entire kit is not very creative at all, like they do need to start making more creative tanks, but this kit is definitely good. There's a lot of defensive boosts here, and they've mixed up boosts that just last for one turn versus boosts that last for the rest of the battle. And let's see what we're going to look at next. Hopefully LB2. And as you can see, the damage increase rate was actually not increased, so the power could be higher. Here's the LB2. He will boost all allies damage reduction rate at the start of any turn after an ally has been defeated, lasts for the rest of the battle. So this is, again, not unique, but it's definitely helpful because this one will last for the rest of the battle, so more permanent buffs alongside some of his other kits. And I'm just glad that they're trying to mix up the permanent buffs somewhat with like guard rate buff, damage reduction rate buff, a permanent debuff, so that's good. I don't like when they just do a bunch of buffs of like the same stat. And this one you have to wait for an ally to be defeated though, so that's the catch. So it will not necessarily happen all the time. That makes it a little bit worse. And if I can find the actual numbers, that will be a little bit more helpful as well. So I think it's going to be 4%. Yeah. So I didn't expect it to be very high because this is one of those permanent stacking ones, and it kind of reminds me of B version 2. So some of the buffs are definitely not high, but they stack. Now we're talking about chakra. So he does not have the best vitality, but you know, it's the purple vitality. A lot of tanks have this and they're still not that bad. Like Kid Naruto is a really great tank and he has this. The idea of tanks is so that they can soak up damage, which is probably why this vitality makes sense design wise, but unfortunately just due to how targeting works in this game, it's like pretty random, so it's pretty inconsistent source of chakra generation. And like PvP especially, you know, you'll never know who's hitting Madara, who's not hitting Madara, and that's like the only issue. But there is ways to get around this just by using chakra generators, so it's not necessarily going to have that big of an impact, and his skill 2 is actually good, so that offsets that as well. Alright, so here we are with the arena battle. Keep in mind that the LB2 of Madara is not unlocked yet, so we're not going to focus on that aspect of this kit during this battle. But as you can see, this is a very nicely set up team, a lot of defense. So we have the Santa Sasori combo with Kakashi and Spirit, which is a good place to put them in this case. And then for energy, we have a ton of defense for Sai with Kid Naruto and Madara defending Sai. Madara going first for the debuffs and the AoE stun. And then for a similar idea, we have SMJ first for the AoE stun, the burn, then SR heavy to combo off of the status effect stuff, and then your heavy to become like really powerful and stack up damage. Now, while I was talking about that, I happened to miss the beginning of the battle. Okay, so we can already see that Madra's 4th skill is triggering here, and the reason is the 4th skill is worded like this. Boosts all allies guard rate by 14% for the rest of the battle. So this is basically just going to trigger right now. It is a permanent buff, which is probably why it's doing this now. So just going to give the guard rate up, as you can see on this red text. A little bit blurry, but it's useful to have this early on so that your important targets are protected as much as possible. There's no reason that you would want a later buff right now. And the other half, where he boosts damage reduction rate, is going to trigger when he rotates it. And you do notice we're at a speed disadvantage, so this will showcase the tanks even better. Lots of great defense. Sasori basically took no damage. Now we have the 4th skill of Madara triggering again, which will basically give damage reduction rate up. Yeah, you saw that behind the chakra up symbol. And we also have him using his skill 2, which is great. So you can see the guard rate up, and that was actually pretty good damage just for like a skill 2 attack, but that's not really that important. The guard rate up like around 50% is huge. So yeah. Now, did that really affect anything since we were going second? Not really, but that's just how it is. Not everything is going to always be optimal. Here comes Sage with Jiraiya. As you can see, his damage is not basically nothing, but it's about the stun. It's about the status effects that he brings. So he stunned KCM, which is great. I think he landed a burn or two. And we're going to talk about these two units in comparison soon. I might as well get started on that soon. Basically, we have created a tier list. By we, I mean Payne, me, and some of like the high level players, the top players from the game. And they happen to be ranked at the same number. We use a numbering system where 10 is the highest and 1 or 0 is the lowest. So we did put them at the same spot, but I do think that it can definitely be a little bit arguable who is better where. I think it kind of depends on the mode, but I am leaning more towards Madara now, and I can explain that. But in the meantime, we have his 4th skill triggering again, giving the damage reduction rate. And I just want to compare the damage because that is something I'm going to talk about a little bit. He might not hit hard at all. You know, he and Seidenwu Jiraiya kind of have that same style. Okay, well, he actually hit really hard. And he landed a stun. So that is going to be my first point here. He does have power creep. It is what it is. Now you could argue that more damage is not that good because they're like AoE stunners, but the AoE stun is like 15%. So I'd say like damage still matters. They're still not going to kill people with the damage, but I like the extra damage on this character. I don't see a world where it's not going to be like useful. And as you can see, Naruto takes no damage. There's just so much defensive buffs going on that Naruto takes a fraction of his health from You Are Heavy, one of the strongest nukers in the game, who got powered up by 4 allies dying. So that's the second thing I want to talk about. Between these two, Seidenwu Jiraiya does have conditions for his jutsu defense buffs, I believe, while Madara does not. So that's why I do like the consistency of Madara's kit. And also, let me just pull this up really quickly. While the battle's running. Yeah, so his jutsu will only last 2 turns, and you know, it also only procs when there are 6 or few undefeated allies. So his jutsu will always burn and stun, but the actual damage reduction rate and guard race boost will not last all the time. And for Madara, he does technically have a portion of his jutsu that doesn't last, but he also has permanent effects with like the permanent debuff and stuff. So I do like that, and he has no conditions on his jutsu. Now if we look at Sage Mode Jiraiya's skill 4, it's basically boosts all active allies damage reduction rate and critical suppression rate. So that's similar to Madara, except the critical suppression rate is like the main difference. So I do like how Sage Mode Jiraiya has that, but he does not have any permanent buffs like Madara does. And then he also recovers his own HPs, which is really useful in Abyss. So that's why I like Sage Mode Jiraiya in Abyss a lot of the time, just for a ton of healing and sustain. And Madara doesn't have that, but he has like permanent buffs, which can kind of offset healing sometimes. Depends really how much damage you're blocking, and also just like the extra damage he provides. As you can see, it gets very, very hairy sometimes when you're comparing these two, but overall I'd say Madara has a pretty good edge. It makes sense. It's the age of power creep. They're going to be reusing like similar ideas, but if you have Sage Mode Jiraiya, and the banner's already over, so you can't really pull anyways, but if you have Sage Mode Jiraiya, there's not really any reason to try to go for Madara again, unless you're really trying to have like a slight unit upgrade or something. And then for Sage Mode Jiraiya's LB2, it's very similar to Madara's, I think. So he boosts all allies' damage reduction rate at the start of any turn after an ally has been defeated. And actually, that's literally what Madara does. So yeah, this whole debate is more showing how Bandai is just being super lazy with units, and they're not doing a very great job of coming up with new things. They're just reusing stuff, which is why these two units are so comparable. Even though they really shouldn't be, like character-wise, they don't really fight the same way. So yeah, could have been done better. But I would just say, at the end of the day, both units are still really great. And yeah, we can talk about vitalities for them as well, which it does get offset by the chakra generation, but technically Sage Mode Jiraiya has a better vitality. Now we're in the battle here. Our rotation's been completely messed up, and we've just been tanking every single turn. It's almost turn 20. And as you can see, that's when the stacking buffs from Madara really start making a difference. Our guys are just not dying. I mean, Kakashi has survived for a really long time, even though he's not always the most tanky. Same for You Are Heavy and Sai, so some of our squishier units have been surviving this entire time. The opponent's team is also doing a pretty good job, but that's why the confused thing from Santa Naruto or like stuns is so powerful. Because we're just attacking with one unit at a time, and then that's probably why we're just surviving so much of the battle. Oh, Madara's gonna attack one more time. I shouldn't have scrolled that. Yeah, as you can see, that was kind of like a wet noodle hit, similar to one of Sage Mode Jiraiya's hits that we watched earlier, but he gets a double stun, so you know what? It doesn't really matter. And there was this other time where he did like actual good AoE hit. So, you know, at the end of the day, sometimes the game just aligns that way. And that's the end of the battle. We actually both have units surviving. That's pretty cool to see. That means both teams are really well made and pretty evenly matched. And hopefully that showcases how strong this tank actually is. I don't like when people are just like over exaggerating stuff and calling them trash and stuff. So yeah, hopefully this video taught you guys something, even though it was a bit late, but a lot of us do have Madara, so hope you enjoyed.